The reason I am so glad to be here is it's the most tangible way that I can continue my dad's legacy. To be honest, it's pretty much too late for him. He won't be with us much longer, but he's suffered a great deal, and his suffering was almost entirely preventable. My dad is the most intelligent person I've ever known in my life. I was one of those little girls, like many little girls, who think, one day I'm going to marry Daddy. His intelligence is only exceeded by his warmth, his compassion, and his lifelong pursuit of the truth. On June 22nd, my mom and I kissed my dad goodbye in a foyer of one of Edmonton's nursing homes. We watched him walk through the main doors, which we of course could not, and it took 8 days and many phone calls, begging, pleading, crying, before my mom was allowed to see him. She was granted one 30-minute visit. From the time my dad entered the center, and he has, well, at that time, advanced dementia. It is now end stage. My dad entered this facility. He had no idea where he was, why he was there. And from that moment on, every single person who interacted with him was gowned, masked, and gloved. Everyone who came into the room stood as far away from him as possible, unless they actually had to perform a procedure which required them to get close. Day after day, all my dad saw were eyes. A face that has only eyes. He became very frightened, and those non-touch thermometers that look like guns, when he would have his temperature taken, because at that time we didn't know the most accurate way is to place it on a wrist, he would flinch. He didn't know who this person was who was coming at his face with something that resembled a gun. Sorry.
You're doing great.
89 days have now passed, and the man that I will be seeing in about an hour no longer resembles my dad. My dad actually used to run marathons, and won often. He is now this frail little old man, slumped over to one side in a wheelchair because of a spinal condition, unable to move or, adjust himself in any way. He's been in this wheelchair since the afternoon he arrived. My dad walked into that facility that afternoon after an unwitnessed fall when he was in isolation and supposed to have a nurse in the room at all times. They placed him in a wheelchair for his own safety. But Mom and I weren't happy. We reluctantly agreed, because if we didn't, it would sound like we didn't want him to be safe. So we said, okay, but tomorrow we want that wheelchair taken away. 89 days later, it has never been taken away. They have not used the walker my mom brought in. They have not tried in any way to get this former marathon runner to walk. We have spoken to every single healthcare provider who has been in contact with him. We've spoken to unit managers. We've done everything that we can. In the morning, each and every morning, they change him and then they use a hydraulic lift to move him from the bed to the wheelchair, where he spends 8 hours a day. Right after supper, they again use the hydraulic lift to take him from the wheelchair to the bed, where he is changed for the second time that day. These rules and regulations do not make sense. I have worked within the healthcare system for 18 years. Mind, it was a much happier side. It was labor and delivery. I've always said I will follow any rule that makes sense. When it stops making sense, I stop following it.
Amen!
My dad is now running his final marathon. We're with him. He's not going to run it alone. And I do this, I'm here today for him and for every single person who has someone they love in a care home. I was informed yesterday that the two very, actually huge pressure wounds on my dad's foot, which have been essentially untreated, are now infected. You know, I have accepted the fact that my dad's brain is dying, and I don't have a choice. It no longer properly maintains his temperature, informs him of when he's hungry, or even now, recently, he's unable to use a straw. You know that sucking reflex that little babies are born with? His has died. I have no choice over that. But I do have a choice in his care and his treatment. And you have a choice in your loved one's care and treatment.
You can start listening to that. 100%. Choose your own treatment if nobody wants to listen to you. Before you get to that point, you were right. Can I have you?
Everybody's got COVID symptoms. $1,200 fine.
If a single word that I have said to you today resonates in any small way, I implore you to act. Act now, today, this minute. If you have someone in a care home, go and see them. Check up on them. Ask to read the chart. Make sure that you know what is going on. And even more so, that you have agreed to it. We have not received a single phone call in 3 months informing us of anything. In fact, one day I went to the nursing home for one of their outside visits, and my dad didn't show up. And I asked a staff member where my dad was, and he said, oh, he's going to be late. He's having an x-ray. And I said, an x-ray of what? I was worried that perhaps he'd fallen. And the staff member said, I don't know. I'll go find out. 15 minutes later, he came back and said, of his lungs. And I said, well, is something wrong? Like, now I'm thinking pneumonia. And the man said, no, you're having a meeting with the doctor on Tuesday. It's just routine. No, chest x-rays are not routine. You can get away with basic blood tests and maybe a urinalysis. That's routine. Chest x-rays are not. So when I finally got to the bottom of it, they were doing it just to be sure. Like they have COVID tested him 3 times. Despite our express wishes that he not be tested, that if he became symptomatic, you are to call me. And I will tell you if you are allowed to test him. On June 22nd, my dad became the property of Alberta Health Services.
Disgusting.
He was no longer ours. He was theirs. We felt that in a very real sense, and we feel it today. And I am determined, because there's relatively little left that I can do for him. But in his honor, in pursuit of the truth, when the death certificate is filled out and they ask for cause of death, I will be writing on it COVID-19 policies.